सजना मैंने तुझसे प्यार किया मैंने तुझसे प्यार किया जीवन भर ये प्यार हमारा जीवन भर ये प्यार हमारा बन के रहेगा अपना सहारा टूट न पाए अब ये कसम टूट न पाए अब ये कसम प्यार न बदले अपना सजना ओ सजना मैंने तुझसे प्यार किया मैंने तुझसे प्यार किया तेरा प्यार है दुनिया में तेरा प्यार है दुनिया में तू ना मिला तो मर जाऊंगी साथ रहे हम जन्म जन्म साथ रहे हम जन्म जन्म साथ ना छूटे अपना सजना ओ सजना मैंने तुझसे प्यार किया 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 मैंने तुझसे प्यार किया
Well, a very pleasant good evening and welcome to the Ken Rampersaud Show on Island Zone Radio on this beautiful Sunday night. I gotta tell you that I just moved up to my new studio. I like what I'm seeing. I would love to get you guys feedback. Um, you know what? It's more quieter. I'll have um, much more of everything. Peace up here. Nobody would disturb me. I would not hear spoon falling. I would not hear their dog barking. I would not hear the parrot saying stop. So I'm in my own man cave, and Dr. Narayan that knows exactly what I'm saying. So again, a very pleasant good evening. I feel so comfortable. And so today our guest is no other than Dr. Narayan Dat Sukram, who hails all the way from Guyana, Berbice man, but
Barbies.
he is living in Kitchener in Canada. I am so proud of him, and always, every time I see he gets an award, I am grateful because I feel that the kind of work that he's doing, that you know what, it's always good to be recognized. A good word, and the world is so messed up right now that people sometimes don't want to give a good compliments. What sells in the world today? It's bad things when people talk wickedness. But I want to say thank you very much, Dr. Narayan, that for tuning in. Today we will talk about peace. You know why? Because yesterday it was International World Peace Day. Dr. Narayan, that a very good evening. How are you doing? You look dash blue. I try to wear blue too. How are you?
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm doing great. I mean, the weather is still nice here, so I just did my walk earlier and whatnot. So I'm doing good. It's yeah.
That's nice. So, um, and I have to congratulate you to Dr. Narayan that because you were the recipient of a Peace Award in 2016, right? Do I get this
That
right?
that is correct. Yeah.
So you are the appropriate man to talk about this today. And so, as yesterday the world celebrate peace, I want to for us to celebrate peace every day. But today we are doing the show. Today we are doing this in unity of to celebrate International Peace Day, a day dedicated to strengthening the idea of peace both within and among all nations and peoples. At a time when conflicts, we know division and inequality continues to affect millions of us every day on a daily basis. This day reminds us of the power of compassion, dialogue that's important, and understanding. Peace is not merely the absence of war, it is a presence. The presence of justice, of inclusion, of empathy, and of hope. And I know that a lot of us have empathy, and the world can do with more empathy, if you know what I mean. It begins with each of us in our world, in our words, in our actions, in the way we treat each other, especially those who are different than us or from us. Let this day be a call to action. Let it inspire us to be peacemakers, as the Bible said it's right, in our community, in our homes, as we reflect on the importance of peace. May we also commit to building a world where every human being can live in dignity and in harmony. Dr. Narayan, I give you the opportunity to give an opening remark, and then we can really talk about how do we really promote peace internationally.
Absolutely. So, first of all, this is a very interesting and important topic, and I'm glad that you are taking the time so that we can hammer it out together,
Right, right,
along with your viewers and listeners and whatnot. And so, I always say one thing, that peace starts with us. So, what that means is,
right.
we all have a responsibility to make sure that we make it a real thing. And one of the things I always encourage people to do is to make sure that you are not thinking, when I say you, I don't mean you, I mean like
Right, right,
in
right.
general.
Got you.
I'm just making sure,
Right, right, right.
speaking of peace, right? We want to keep the peace here. Yeah. So I think what I guess what I was trying to say is that we have to accept the fact that peace starts with us, and we have to also accept the fact that my way of doing things is not the only way, right? And so when I talk about things as such, I'm talking about the way I worship, for example, right? And so I might worship a certain way, and that's okay. I cannot condemn, the way other people choose to worship, and even if people don't believe in God and so forth, that is okay too. There are different levels for us to contribute, and to make peace a thing, and that's include the basic level of things, the everyday people. It also include things like the system, right? Sometimes we have to make changes in the system. I'm talking about the political system, because those are things that can cause real conflict. So, for example, if we have system in place where only certain demographic are being benefited from whatever resources are available, those things can cause lots of conflict, right? Um, Anything as such. But also, um, when we are at fault for something, we have to make sure that we acknowledge it, and we are going to get into depth into that a little bit later on, because if I, let's say, for some reason, I've made a mistake, or I've kind of screw up in some shape or form, and let's say I'm not taking ownership of my own action, that can create a lot of problem, because ideally, as human beings, we tend to want to put the blame on somebody else, right? So all of those things can contribute to lots of conflict that can really lead us to really dangerous things. And so once we understand it, once we have these kinds of ongoing conversation, once we're conscious about it, um, peace will become a real thing for sure. Yeah.
Right, right. And you are correct. Peace starts from within us because, from what I understand, is that a lot of times what we're feeling inside, that's what we portray as human being. A lot of times you will find that people will go through a hard time at home and they may be a supervisor, and when they get to work they throw all of that on the employee and cause a lot of conflicts within the job or wherever they go. It's a lot of conflict. So I totally agree with you that this starts at home. And how can we really promote this at home as as a father or as a mother, a wife, a husband? How do we
Yes,
promote
definitely. Yeah,
peace in a home? Because you and I know we want peace in our home, especially when we wake up in the morning or when we go to bed. We don't want to wake up in chaos. And it's important that we have a partner who brings
for sure. And
peace.
it can happen from time to time, right, in every home. And so
Right,
I think it
right,
starts
right,
off
right.
with clear and open communication. That's extremely important. A lot of times, we don't have like clear communication in the family system, and that can be a huge problem, right? And so, meaning that if you have a partner, if you're married, you have a family, the wife should know what's going on, and vice versa. The husband should know what's going on. It could be as simple as the mother is choosing to take the child to do shopping today, where it is clearly communicated to the father, so the father is aware, um, all of these types of things. Because if it's not communicated properly, then you can have small issues, right? And then those small issues can lead up to really bigger things. Because if people don't have like problem solving skills, for example, then as you would know, people will bring up all kind of different things that took place like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, all of these types of things, and it kind of adds up, right? So the number one thing
Right,
is communication. And you'll be amazed to know how simple communication can really prevent so many things, even in the workplace to begin with, right? Yes,
right,
for
right,
sure.
right.
Not knowing is the toughest thing. That's for sure. It could be a simple thing, and trust me on this one. I've dealt with a lot of this in the workplace professionally, because we all have different upbringing, and so my way of communicating might be very different, than the receiving end, all of these sides of things. So it's not an easy thing, but um, you know, clear communication, and kind of really, listen to people as well too. It is not always like our way, as I was mentioning earlier in the introduction. We have to really create space for everybody, right? So me, for example, I'm in leadership role, and so I manage a bunch of people. But that does not mean that I know it all, or
Right.
that does not mean I
Absolutely.
take control, and just speak for 2 hours and, don't give other people an opportunity. In fact, in my previous, one of my previous jobs, I had to let the CEO know that, look, you need to cut down your talking time. You cannot
Tone it down.
have 10 people and you're spending 90% of the time talking. So all of those things extremely important, right? Create a safe space for people to kind of voice their opinion, and that's in a professional setting. But as to come back to the home aspect of it, as you mentioned, what can we do at home? Definitely, we have to be present, and sometimes we are there physically, but we are not fully present. And I think we have to be mindful of that as well too, because we live in a challenging world. People go through individual challenges, as we talk about mental health challenges, all of these types of things. And so even though a parent, for example, might be home physically, they might not be there psychologically for their children and so forth, and all of those things can lead to lots of chaos, that's for sure.
And I want to thank you. And I want to say, while you're talking, I'm listening. And I think culture too has a big part to play in peace too, because people from different parts of the world, if they come like Africa or Guyana, and two different culture clash together, what one stand maybe think it's something that's acceptable in another culture, right?
100%. You've nailed it. Good question. And I'm so happy to respond to this one. As you know, we live in a multicultural world here, right? In
Right,
North
right.
America, in the States, you may have met people from so many different countries. In fact, last Saturday to this Monday, right? Yes, last Saturday,
Yeah.
I represented Guyana. at a mainstream event. I was the only Guyanese there,
Right,
representing
right.
Guyana to promote Guyana and promote the culture and all of that. And there were people from obviously different part of the world doing the same thing. And I have to tell you, it was such of a warm experience. No alcohol was there, so there was no
Wow.
drinking and jumping. There was nobody lip singing or anything of that there. It was all educational stuff, and there were
Right,
thousands
right,
of
right.
people, and it was
Right.
amazing to speak with so many different people coming to me, asking me about Guyana and whatnot. And people were amazed, because I really showcased Guyana really well. That I can take credit for because I
You,
I, I,
thank
I
you.
went there for a
Thank
purpose
you.
to really promote Guyana and whatnot. And and all the other people and from different countries I never heard of because nobody knows it all, right? Even in India, like we just know of India, but there are so many different small places in India and so forth. And one of the
Right.
culture, one of the biggest thing, for example, is they provide tea. As soon as you go to their home, they give you tea. Like there is no question asked. That's what they do. So beside me, the lady had like all kind of different, tea, to taste and try and so forth. And as I was
Wow.
sitting there, anybody passed by, the lady was like wholeheartedly, I could feel it saying to people
Oh,
like, would you like, try some tea and whatnot? And you'll be amazed to know how people are, people are interested to know these things. And honestly, it was like a win-win situation because well, obviously I was excited to promote Ghana, right? Because I'm a born Guyanese at the end of the day, but learning from so many people, and I think people need to have those kinds of openness because I see on on social media where people, if they're Hindu or if they're Muslim, they kind of stick with that and they don't think the other way is the right way and so forth. I think people need to really put aside their own personal values at the side and be more open. And I
right,
can
right.
assure you it makes such of a huge difference. Study shows, by the way, that it makes a huge difference. That's one of the reasons why the region, it was sponsored by the region, by the way. The region support these types of thing. Amazing. So good question. And so, for example, like it's very different than our Caribbean Dreams concert. Even though we try to broaden it, as you will know, it is very different than the
Right,
Guyanese Day and so forth. Because Guyanese Day only attracts, generally speaking, like the Guyanese people, right? But when you come together
right.
as one from different culture, it's a whole different thing. And those are the kind of things we need to do more of. We cannot just say, okay, well, Guyana is better than Trinidad and vice versa on all of these type of thing, right? We have to value what we have, embrace what we have, and we have to accept the fact that other people will value and embrace what they have, and that's the key.
Beautiful. I want to share this story while you're talking about peace. I was at work yesterday morning and somehow or the other, I was very annoyed. But I was aware that I was annoyed and I know what exactly happened. So one of the worker came and said to me, "Do you want the patient to come now to do the blood pressure?" And I'm like, I didn't mean any harm or anything. I said, "Listen, I don't care what time they come, as long as before they get the medication, I will do their blood pressure." And she said okay, and she walked away. And then after a couple of minutes after, I went over to her and I said, I hope that, my response didn't offend you because I did not mean any way to offend you. Is that like, I don't care what you
Mhm.
do or whatever I do. What matters to me is that the
Mhm.
patient get their medication on time. And she said, no, 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 it's fine. But sometimes it's a good thing when we feel how we feel that we own up to how we feel and to if we offend someone or we're not sure if how the person um, accept that to go and explain ourselves. I think it's a great thing. What you
Absolutely, and
think?
that's always the best thing. And in fact, exactly what you have said, we put it in policy. We put it in policy where if there's any misunderstanding or if any confusion or anything along that line, the way you felt, you felt that there may have been a little bit of a confusion or misunderstanding there, and you went to kind of find out of the situation, and that is the best approach. So that way you get that cleaned up and cleared up, and you move on, kind of thing, right?
Right.
And believe it or not, it sounds very simple, but it is a big deal, and that's one of the reasons we end up putting that into in a policy. So what that means is if somebody you need to address anything, they need to come to me first rather than go to somebody else and kind of complain about neighbors. All right.
Right, 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 right.
Right?
Exactly
Because you
so.
have all of those things happening too. Yeah,
Right,
for different reasons. A lot of people don't like authority figure and so forth. So you've done the right thing, and I'm glad that
right,
you
right.
really share it on here. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you, thank you. And let's talk a little bit about. We have talked about household. We've talked about our job, which I loved how we addressed that. Let's talk a little bit about our community. And I can probably talk about our community here in New York, where there is a lot of confusion. I'm sure you're following what's going on in our community. And there's a lot of times I want peace. I would love to see peace in our community. I would love to see people accept their faults and what do I say? Accept our faults, apologize if we have to, and move on, just for safety, for peace sake. But from your neck of the woods, what are you seeing, and how can we really help our community for
Yeah.
peace sake?
So I can't believe what I'm seeing actually. That I can start
Right,
off. I
right,
think
right.
that's safe to say. Honestly, based on some of the things that I've seen, I think it is so dark and deeply rooted that it's you and I wouldn't be able to see any sort of changes in those area. For not necessarily decades but generations actually. Right. So, but I
Right,
think we have
right.
to make the start. So what that means is, in generations to come, the world will be a better place as long as we have these kinds of conversations and so forth. At the end of the day, it seems like, and I'm referring to things that I'm seeing, right? I'm talking about things that you may have seen. At the end of the
Right, right,
day,
right.
it looks like people
Yeah.
wants to win and people wants to have the last word, and it looks like people don't know to put a full stop and say, well, this is it now. This is too much. People are not it looks like they're having difficulties, putting themselves in someone else's shoe. And the reason why I'm saying this is because it is not clear to me as to why somebody will say that, they are a role model, for example, and then you behave a certain way. I think, in my view of things, it doesn't align. It doesn't align. It doesn't align with each
Correct,
other, so to
correct,
speak.
correct.
And in no
Yes,
shape or form I'm saying that I'm
yes.
perfect. I'm not perfect, and I've never met any perfect people, and nor do I
Right,
strive to be perfect. I'm not a perfectionist, and so that's one reason I do great in the workplace because I get the work done. Right? So
right,
I have no worry with that. So I
right.
think. I also think though, Ken, which we have talked about it previously, I also think that this whole social media thing, contributed to it as well too. Sometimes people are looking for attention. I come from a very disciplined, home. Apart from that, I have, like a beautiful family, have like wonderful kids. I'm very connected in the community. So I'm engaging in
Right.
meaningful activities and meaningful things.
Of
Kind of, you know what I'm
course.
talking about, right? And so a lot of people don't have that,
Yes, yes.
and so they now are kind of dying for attention as well too, in a different way. Unfortunately, I can almost assure you that in time to come, when they're gonna look back at their own life history, they will have a lot of regrets, for sure. Some of the things I've seen. I'm thinking that this is not normal stuff, right? And so it seems to me as if people are also suffering like deeply from different sort of mental health challenges as well too, and I can speak along the line because I have that kind of knowledge, because very dark stuff I've seen, and I'm something pitching myself. I'm thinking like, is this actually real, right? And especially coming from a woman, like when I see things, certain things coming from a woman, I think it's really put even a darker stain on things. Not that we are discriminating here between men and
Right.
women,
Absolutely.
women
Yes,
per se,
yes,
but
yes.
I think all of us should carry ourselves professionally and so forth. But I think a woman in particular, especially that women usually get the short end of the stick, and so
Right.
people, women need to support each other. You really have to dig deep to find the one good thing, from each other and kind of highlight those pieces. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, situation where people are looking for that one block dot and block spot, and they're going to massage it like all over the place and so forth. And the bad thing about it is that people are even affecting their own mental health,
Correct.
with all of these things as well too, right? And so it's kind of like you have like you're throwing fire, on top of fire kind of thing, right? And one of the things I always say is that the best way to separate the mud from water is to let it sit by itself. So because if you take the stick and you stir the muddy water, you will never see the clearness, right? The best way to see the clearness of the water is to let it settle, and eventually the crumbs and the dirt will settle, and you
Right,
take it
right.
and you throw it away. So what I'm trying to say here is that people going back and forth doesn't really do any good, really. It probably give them some sort of temporary satisfaction and so forth, but it wouldn't solve anything, that's for sure. And then it's at least in my eyes, from my lens, it just doesn't look good, and I don't think they're seeing it though, and that's one of the problems, right? Yeah.
Yeah, um, I have to tell you that why I'm glad that you are on this program is because you you studied a lot. You have all the qualification, and is one of the authority who could really speak on these things. The other thing is, as a psych nurse for a long time, over 20 years experience, like I've always tell people, I was not that brilliant guy. But over the years, with working with psych patients and people with depression, I myself is seeing a lot of things that I don't like. And one of the things that I see a lot sometimes, people are really fighting to get some kind of attention. And what is this attention we're looking for? Because the truth of the matter is, we are, and I've always said this, that we are born and we're going to die from this world. We are not going to die a winner. We're not going to die with a lot of things. The thing is that when we go is how we live this life. The other thing is that we have not realized, and you know more than I do, but I have a lot of experience where with all that's going on, children are involved, children witness these kind of things. And I got to be honest with you, Dr. Narayan, that as a mental health nurse and an addiction nurse, I get the opportunity to sit down and interview a lot of patients for admission. And because I'm a talk show host and because I want to be able to have conversations with people like you, I ask these people, like, did you regret you killed this one? Did you sorry you start to use drugs? If you have to live your life all over again, what how would you have lived this life? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so a lot of people, parents, we don't realize that our behavior in our home could cause a lot of problem for children growing up. You and I know they could get PTSD, they could end up with depression, and all these things. So we, as parent, I am being very mindful what I expose. My boys are big now. What I expose them to, what I when I mean cursing in the house, abusing my wife, and all these things, I don't do these kind of things. You know what I'm saying? I try to live a straight life and to be a good role model, because I believe that what children see is what they will do. Like I see mommy and daddy fighting every day. That will become a normal thing for when these children grow up. What's your take, Dr. Narang, that?
Yes, for sure. So study shows that if children see certain things, it is not uncommon for them to model these types of things. Having said that, though, I want to make it clear, not everybody will go that path, right?
Right, right, right,
Some people, I've known people personally who've kind of grew up in challenging homes and
right. True.
break up homes and so forth, and they turn to be champions in society and just amazing kind of thing. But
Yes.
generally speaking, we need to break this cycle when it comes to
Yes.
things as such. And so that's one of the reason, we always encourage people to utilize the resources that are available, meaning that if they're struggling at home, let's say there's like, domestic violence, in the home, don't be ashamed, and afraid to utilize the resources at hand. In fact, somebody shared with me that their mom, seek out help and whatnot. And the individual was kind of confused. He shared with me, he said to me, when my mom was in Ghana, she never did any of that and so forth. But the
Right,
problem
right.
is that she did the right thing is because she was not feeling safe at home. She was being abused, by the husband. She at that time she had a small baby, so she was basically utilizing, the resources at hand, to kind of protect herself and protect the individual. It's just that when people see certain behavior, as you mentioned earlier, for the children it becomes a norm. So they don't see that to be an issue. This is what they've seen, and they're thinking the behavior is normal kind of thing. And so and again, and that's one of the reasons we're having all of these kinds of conversation. But again, um, you know even the teacher these days will try to stay connected with the parents. They want parents to be involved with the kids and so forth, because they know that they have the capability to do their best in the school system, but they also know that they both have to be on the same page, right? They cannot teach all of these things in the school system, and when the kids, when they come back home, they're in a whole different environment, right? So ideally, if parents are in a stable mind, and if they have support where they can support not only themselves, because they themselves have to be in that mindset, and you know um, because at the end of the day they cannot feed off an empty bucket. So if they're stressed out for a variety of different reason, at the end of it all, whoever live in that household, they will be affected. And it's not only the kids per se; it could be whoever else is living in that household, right? It could be the the in-laws, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, and grandparents, and cousin and whatnot as well too. But generally speaking, the kids will be affected the most.
Um, I'm going to ask you this question, but before you answer me the question, I would like to say hello to some of the people here. But I'm going to ask you this question so you could think very carefully how you would approach it. And because we want peace in our community, let's say that if you have to have a conversation with some of the problems that you are seeing in this community, and you have to sit down with these people on your couch, how would you advise them? What would you tell them to do? And so think,
Mhm.
let me say hello to some of our people here. Anita Ish Daulatram, a very good afternoon, good evening to you. Our girl Balika Sinarina, very good evening to you. Thank you very much for watching. Shahid Baksh, always a great supporter on Island Zone Radio. He said, be good, or at least be nice to everyone. We all respect everyone's beliefs. And Muhammad, Radia Muhammad said, when at fault, it's okay. People make mistakes, but you must own up to your faults and mistakes. Absolutely. And no doubt, big guys want peace. I doubt the big guys want peace. Shaliza Ali, a very good evening to you, and thank you for tuning in. I know Shaliza spent most of the morning this morning um, in Guyana trying to clear these barrels that we got there. Pamela Jagmohan, a very good evening to you. Watching from Saudi in Essequibo Coast. Thank you very much, Pamela, for tuning in. Mala Harprasad, a very good evening to you. Thank you very much. The beautiful Miss Hafiza Khan. Thank you very much for tuning in Island Zone Radio. And guys, I would like for you to share this show with your friends and your family. Also, like I said, this is a new studio. I don't know if everything is tuned up yet properly, but DJ Fest was here today to make sure that everything is working. But sometimes you never know, just by you check. And I really do like how it's looking. Also, I want to tell Dr. Narayan that thank you so much, because I quite a few people reach out to me and said, I am glad that you are teaming up with Dr. Narayan Dat in Canada to do this show. And thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know that you have your hands full. And thank you. So you could go ahead and answer my question. How would you approach these things? What your conversation would be like in a room with some of these people?
Yeah. So before I answer a question, I want to thank those people who reach out to you to kind of, mention and acknowledge the partnership that we have. And I think that's because the two of us, have good head on our shoulders, right? So I think
Thank
that's
you.
that.
We try. Thank you.
So I think the reality is sometimes we have to be, not sometimes, the way I operate, we really have to be transparent with people,
Yes.
right? And so we really cannot beat around the bush, so to speak, in simple language here. And so if I see something, right? like what I've been saying, and let's say I'm starting to realize that this is damaging not only to the individual, but but to the community,
Right.
and who knows where it goes from here. I actually will utilize my skill set to offer help to that individual, because sometimes we really have to get to the root cause of the problem, right? And it could be that that individual is going through something, and so I'm trained, and I'm sure you are too in in your profession. So I'm trained to really get to the bottom of these things. So technically, I will be asking, this, those individual, partner questions without them even realizing, and so
Right.
forth. You kind of try to put the puzzle together to see like what's happening here. Not trying to diagnose anybody, don't get me wrong, but have a good sense as to what's happening. And once I have a good sense as to what's happening, and based on the relationship that I have with them, that's how I will approach it. So let's say I have really good relationship with somebody, I can get to the bottom of it and say, look, do you realize that like the video you've made yesterday and talk about all of these people, it's just not looking good, right? I can do that. But if I don't know them so well, I have to be mindful as to how I'm approaching them, right? Because sometimes they can see it in a negative way where they might feel as if I'm attacking them, and right. And so the approach, that trauma informed, as you would know, that trauma informed approach will be key. But at the end of the day, if we know that there are damages that's been that's been done based on their action and so forth, we really cannot allow it to slide, because honestly, ethically, I cannot let it slide. I cannot do that. So for me now, as a registered person with my body here in Ontario, if I see something, I cannot ignore it, right? For just like abuse, like if I know if anybody's abusing anybody, ethically, I cannot ignore that situation. I have to address it, right? And in some cases, report it. When I say report it, because we are in that line of work, just like a police officer. If a police officer, on the road, and if he sees something, he cannot ignore it. He has an ethical responsibility, right, to address it.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, I will be non-judgmental, because that's how I've kind of approach it.
Absolutely.
Because I might be looking at it from one lens, right, and might not be able to understand what's happening. So I will try my very best based on the knowledge I have and expertise I have to view the situation from their lens. And maybe it could be that's all it takes. It could be that's all they need. Sometimes people, you know, um, just a little conversation, like in 20 seconds. Even a lot of people, and study is a slight different conversation here, but similar example. A lot of people have planned to go and do, plan to go to do plan to do shooting in a school, for example. You have
Right.
specific people. They want to go do a shooting in the school, and then at the end of it all, they want to die by a police officer. Like that's their wish. Like these
Right.
things,
Right. 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 It
yeah, it does
happens.
happen, and that's what they want. They want to die, but they don't want to kill themselves. They want to die differently. So my point here is that those things can be those things can be turned around when you if you have the if you intervene at the right time. And sometimes it takes 20 seconds. Not the
Right.
psychiatrist, not the psychologist, not of that kind. It could be just somebody who who can actually create a space where people can open up. I've seen people where they just break down, cry, and so forth, and all of
Wow.
these types of things, and then that changed the whole thing. Similarly, these people, because the behavior, and I'm going to come back to the behavior that I see, and maybe I'm being a little bit judgmental as well too, because like I wouldn't do anything like that. Not that I don't get angry and upset and so forth. I will deal with it differently. I mean, I've blocked people. I'll be honest with you, I've kind of blocked people, and because I realized that. Um, not all of us can be friends and so forth. And if I realize that there are frictions and a conflict there, and if we cannot get along properly, I'm thinking like, look, there are different things we can do. I can block you and I can wish you well. You move on, I move on. But to go back and forth and so forth, so I really, as to get straight to it again, have that open conversation and say, look, Ken, I'm not sure if you were realizing, but I've most recently I've seen that you've posted some inappropriate videos in terms of the things you've said. and so forth. Yeah, and just listen as well too. Listen without any judgment, as I mentioned, and get that their response and kind of start to intervene and assist from there, because we cannot let it slide that way. Right? Yeah. People are angry and upset. When people are angry and upset, you know this. People do anything, right?
Mhm.
And that's one way for them to do, like people getting their anger out. And then it becomes a norm for them too, right? Because they're getting used to the likes and the views and the share and so forth, right? because they are not they're not understanding the difference between quantity and quality. They're not they're in the short mindset here. They're not thinking of long term effect here. They're just looking. So my goodness, like I've just made a short video. I cuss out a few people, and look, I got so many thousand of views. They're not understanding that more views for those kind of content, you're right, they are actually doing lots of damages to
Right.
society, to the world. They're not seeing that.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and then the thing is that as we're talking about Facebook, you talk about social media. How do we deal with? And you talk a little bit about. Um, we could talk a little bit about bullying too. How do we deal with all this bullying? That's we want peace. Every one of us that's conscious and have a good head on our shoulder, we want peace. We want peace on Facebook. We want when we turn on Facebook that we read something that's positive. And I really do try every morning when I wake up to send out a nice quote for
Hmm.
some so people could read
Hmm.
and uplift them a little bit. So how can we deal with things like bullying and so on social media, especially TikTok and Facebook? I heard our Guyanese community is tearing tail and you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
On TikTok, they are running wild. How do we deal with all of this?
yeah. They're really running wild. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
that's yeah. So when it comes to any sort of bullying, I think it's important for us to address the person directly, as we mentioned earlier about keeping the peace and things of that sort. So let's say we were to see something inappropriate, or let's say somebody kind of make a negative comment on our posts and things of that sort, which is not uncommon, by the way. I think the best approach is to kind of reach out to that person. But one thing I can tell you, for some reason, people really are get triggered easily.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's not much you can do, because you cannot control people based on what they do and what they say and so forth. You can keep the peace though, because
Right.
very recently, I know a gentleman. I'll give you a perfect example here. I've known of a gentleman to be a good gentleman, a good individual, like family oriented people, and whatnot, some family issue and whatnot, but a lot of respect for me and so forth. And they and they made a comment on one of my posts, kind of thing, and so forth. And I didn't find it was appropriate. I felt that there are different ways for us to kind of handle those kind of situations. Um, so I started to kind of slowly kind of monitor things and making sure that things doesn't get out of hand. When I say out of hand, like not too much engagement and so forth,
Right. Right. Right.
but for some reason, the person recognized that I was not as
Right. Engage.
engaging as
Right.
as I used to, and I did that for a reason.
Right.
I have to be respectful of people as well too, so I kind of give them their space as well too.
Yes.
But it looks like they wanted their way, kind of thing. They wanted to do their thing, but they wanted to have that continuous engagement and so forth. And that part, the person flipped like and became like a whole different person. And
Oh
the kind of
wow.
wording and the kind of wording that they use, they kind of like to me like I mean, in like true messenger way, very dirty things and so forth. And then so I never respond to any of that, because I know better than this, and I realized at the end of it all, like, we are representing ourselves. But I did block that individual, because I realized that I don't have those I don't have those kinds of time to kind of really try to mend something as such. So sometimes, because at the end of the day, the reality is, like, I'm just being realistic here, we all have a life on our own, right? So I have a wife, I have kids. Yes, we do our social media piece and we do our public pieces and so forth. But at the end of the day, I'm not responsible for people's behavior, right? And so if there's an opportunity to address the bullying, and so forth, I will do it, but in a nice manner. But if I realize that it's also taking up lots of energy and it's not going anywhere, I have to also be mindful of my own mental health as well too, because I always put myself first, and it took me a long time to kind of get it, and a lot of people don't get it, because at the end of the day, I cannot feed off an empty bucket as well too, right? And so I kind of, because I'm a big picture person, so I kind of look at things,
Oh, okay. Hmm.
from different angles, and I know that there's not, like a one size that fits all, meaning that one particular approach that works for one set of people wouldn't necessarily work for the other people. And so if nothing comes out of it, you really have to kind of move on, because you cannot get stuck on the one thing that's holding you back, really, you know what I mean? So that's a key thing as well. Like I can still navigate things even though there are some challenges there. We have to be mindful of that, and really not allowing them to win though in any shape or form, right?
Yes.
So those are all pieces we have to keep in mind, but we cannot ignore it. I think the main thing is that we need to kind of intervene, based on our knowledge, and not being judgmental. But if we realize people are deeply and darkly affected, let's say some sort of mental health issue and so forth, you and I cannot fix that. These things takes months of treatment, to tell you the truth. And in some cases, I honestly think in some cases there are some mental health issues and challenges for sure. Because I can see how people flip flop. Really, I'm not sure if I'm explaining it properly here, but people flip
Yeah,
flop. You know what I mean? Like one, they make a video and they're like the best person possible, and then all of a sudden they flip flop and they're like a different person, right? And people have, and as you would know, people have, they are like people with multiple personalities. Those are actual real things, right? And we've seen it, right?
I'm glad you said some of the things that you said. Listen, um, what I learned though over the years, you know, is that you can, if someone doesn't like you and always put you down and doesn't care to give you a good comment, there is nothing that you could really do to change that person. So what I learned over the years, I I pay no attention to them. I block and delete same time, because I find that you can't change people's minds. Sometime who don't like you, they don't like you. That's it. I meant to talk about this part earlier because you mentioned something that resonate in my brain. I believe that, look, certain behavior comes with its territory. For example, and I'm going to say pandit or a religious, let me say religious priest, so that I don't put myself in trouble.
You want to keep the
You know what
peace, right?
I mean? Let me go talk defensively, my brother. So, for example, if you're a religious person, I expect certain kind of behavior from you. I expect kindness. I expect goodness. I expect if we have a conversation, you would not be cursing and talk to me. I expect your words would be kind. You would be more of a therapeutic person. You would not curse and wave cutlass at people. So when I look at people these days and I hear what they're saying and they want to do this and they want to do that, and I use that as my yardstick too. Because if I want to be a community minded guy and I want to make a difference in the world, then I want to uphold myself at a certain standard, right? What's your take?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll respond it to you this way. So obviously, if somebody is in that position, that religious leader role, or the community leader role and so forth, it is crucial actually for people to really be a good role model, right? Because people are
Right?
watching you,
Yes.
and actually, it took me, and I will give you a good example. It took um, me a while to kind of get it. I mean, now we are more mature, we're educated. That's different. But in my earlier days, um, I actually went to the casino,
Yes.
and people know me here. I'm like, people have a lot of respect for me, and and whatnot. And I went to the
Right.
casino, with
Yes.
friends, and after work, just to kind of get away from everything else. And so people said, well, do you guys want to go to the casino? So I said, sure. This is a way a while back,
Right. Right.
and that became an issue that I
Oh,
went to the, yes, so that because when you are in certain roles, or whatever, people have certain expectation of you as well too, right,
right.
and so forth. But for me, and I really had to think and reflect, because I was thinking that at the end of the day, I have a life as well too, and I didn't see it that way.
Right.
But because for me, that's very different than cursing, as you was kind of, cursing, or kind of, doing, inappropriate things all over the place and so forth. But definitely, but when it comes to especially like a religious leader, for example, not that their life is perfect, but I think if when people are choosing to do those types of things, it comes with a lot of commitment. You really have to be committed
Correct.
to
Yeah.
it. You have to know how you're carrying yourself, and so forth. And I commend them, for giving their best shot and so forth, because life is not easy. They are human beings as well too, so they themselves go through challenges, and sometimes they're being blamed for stuff that they're not responsible for, and things of that sort. But you have nailed it. You really have to be, you have to have the conscious mind, knowing that people are looking at you, and even and now with the social media stuff, you have to be mindful, as to what you post as well too. And even
Oh,
me,
yeah.
I'm very mindful as to what I post. Like, I sometimes
Right.
I look at something, I'm thinking this is pretty funny, and maybe I should post it, but no, because I'm thinking, look, you know, you have to be mindful, right? And so forth. So
Absolutely.
definitely, and do know that a lot of pundits and so forth, and I'm not going to mention by the name, but a lot of people reach out to me, and we do have, one-on-one conversation in terms of me motivating them as well too, and so forth, because they also go through a lot of challenges, um, sometimes among themselves or things of that sort. But excellent point for sure. You have to carry yourself professionally when you've made a decision, right, to kind of take on those kinds of responsibility.
Shahid. Shahid says you have to learn to expect the unexpected. Absolutely. Um, live your life the way you want to live too. Um, Another thing, my next question to you is, and people asking this question keep people keep asking me all the time, as religious leaders, as leaders in a community, excuse me, don't we have a responsibility to help keep the peace? And one of the question I get often is what our community leaders are doing in this community to to tone down this rhetoric and to tone down these problems that we have. How come you've allowed to these things to move go on for years? So
Yeah. So
don't you think that as community leaders we have a role and responsibility? Let me say hi to David Singh. Thank you very much, brother, watching from Florida. I think. How are you? Thanks for tuning in. So, what is our role in our community leaders that we have right here?
yeah, so it's all depends who you consider to be role models and community leaders and so forth. Because a lot of people who consider themselves to be community leaders and so forth, um, I see them to be very troublesome people. Not to mention by the name here. And so I think it comes back to what we talk about. And so if we are conscious, and if we are wanting to be that role model, I think I think the idea is to work together, right? We cannot work against each other. So you might have um, different interests or different skill set, right? And so you can utilize that to kind of make an impact in the community, and somebody else might have something else. It's not a competition thing per se, and I think that also can cause some problem, because at the end of the day, as human beings, for some reason people want to overshine, other people, and also want to be in the top, and in order for them to have that satisfaction, you'll be amazed to know how low people will go to bring other people down. But when people start to do that, I don't see them to be a role model really, because are community leader, because you really have to be one of those where people can go to you. You have to be one of those where you're the one making the peace. So let's say there's something happening there, and let's say for some reason you don't get along with that person very well, but let's say you go to like a wake house or something. You want to be able to separate those two things, and honestly, I can do that so well.
Uh-huh.
It's like a gift. So I can have the worst relationship with somebody, very rarely, I have the situation, but it does happen from time to time. But let's say I'm going somewhere, I will actually, I know how to separate those two and kind of have a good conversation. And in fact, I'll tell you this story here. It's amazing that we're talking about this. There was one gentleman, a very good gentleman, and so forth. And so there was a little bit of a misunderstanding between him and I. This is a different story now, and so we have not spoken in a while because I want to keep the peace. He wants to keep the peace. So we have not spoken because he's busy doing his thing. I'm busy doing my thing. But he went last Saturday to that event, that multicultural event. And when that guy came there, he kind of came. He's from a different country. When he came to me, and I offered him something to eat right away, and he gave me feedback too. I told him that one is pretty good. I thank him for coming and so forth. So my point is that we have to be able to separate, like our feelings, right?
Right, right, right.
When it comes to that, like if I was young or not having the knowledge that I have, I probably would have ignored it, the individual, like kind of maybe, start to who knows what, right? So I think all of those things, like a leader, a community leader, you have to be mindful of those things. So when you are out there, this is not about you anymore. It is about us. It is about us working together. It's not about it's not an individual thing anymore. It's us,
Mm,
right? Yes, we do a lot of independent stuff. Like I do a lot of independent stuff, and so forth. So I don't, and I like to do a lot of independent stuff too, because I don't necessarily have to wait for approval for anybody. Certain things I work in partnerships, certain things I don't, because I have more, the drive to do certain things. But at the end of the day, people have to work towards a common good, right? And if we, are all over the place, then what example are we setting, right? When you think about it, what example are we setting for the younger generation? And
true.
so working
I,
together is key. And we have a lot of work ahead of us. There's no question about that, based on what I've seen. And I'm not sure what it is. If it's people want to be different and thinking that it's okay to just put somebody down, look for a flaws, and try to make some content here. Like those things should be banned. I'm not getting it, actually, to tell you the truth.
true, true, true.
Hmm.
We tend to forget a lot of times that as adults, right? We are role models for our community. Some of us for our children, at least for somebody. Um, let's see. Somebody asked. Kim just says, "I just joined. The topic tonight is peace. How do we promote peace? Some of the things that we could do, and we sharing stories. And Shahid says, none of us are perfect. Only God is. Shahid, I really totally agree with you. But at the same token, I cannot go around and committing acts of violence and saying I'm not perfect. No, none of us are perfect. But I aspire to do great things and I aspire to do good things in life. And you said it right, though. We are not perfect. So, but certain things are expected of us. If like we are a nurse or we are a teacher, we are a social worker, or we are someone in the community. Like for example, I'm just gonna say this, and I just like if you're a religious leader, like I don't expect you to go and rape a little child or thief or do these kind manner of things. You know what I'm saying? I expect kind of godly thing. And I'm gonna tell you a story. When I was, but thank God I had the wisdom back then. When I was about 19 years old, some Americans came to Guyana from the Christian church here in Alabama, and they asked me to join the church to become a preacher to go to Bible college. And 2 weeks after, I was still a young boy, haven't seen much and so on. and haven't experienced life a little bit. So I said to myself that, you know what, I would not be able to do this because I haven't lived life as yet, and I really want to do. Um, I just want to make sure that I align myself with what I want to do. So so that's where I look at it. So I don't think that we have a lot of time more. I just probably have one more question for you, Dr. Narayan. And then we will let you go. I know you're a busy man and you have to put that child to sleep. Um, I didn't forget. So my final question to you is, and I don't know if I'll ask another question, but my next question to you is, how do we, and we're the presidents and ministers and so on come in, how do we internationally promote peace?
Yes, good question. And so during the introduction piece here, I talk about systemic change, and so there's a lot of greed in the world, right? And so people who are in power, they are in a good position to really make those changes to really create a more peaceful world. But
Right,
then
right.
the greed comes in, right? For example, right now, um, we may have one country trying to kind of work against other country, things of that sort, and it causes a lot of issue because when we make those changes and when let's say we put policies in place where we're taxing let's say another country more money, this is just an example. At the end of the day, what's happening? Who's suffering? The everyday people, the poor people are
Poor
suffering.
people, yes,
So
yes.
it's not, so I can, being a Canadian, I can say, well, let's do this and so forth because I have the authority to do that. But at the end of the day, is the everyday people suffering. So I think
Yeah,
people
man.
have to start to think along that line. um, they have they I honestly think though that a lot of people, I'm hoping people see it as a good thing. A lot of people can take example of the president of Ghana and many of the ministers. I have to say that I'm very proud of them. Many of them, obviously, they're not perfect people, as one of the viewers mentioned. Like nobody's perfect, but I have to say that these folks, like they meet, the people where they're at. They're not sitting in their office. They're kind of, out there. And I wish if more people could start to do these things, um, because that's the only way we'll have a better world, a better place where we can say we are really one world living together. This is like a long generation after generation situation here, but the greed, I really believe it has a lot to do with greed, because we would want our country to do better than the other country and vice versa and so forth, and then we are kind of not sharing our resources with each other, all of these types of things. War, like who could have who can still believe that we have war happening at the end of the world. Innocent people are losing their lives. Like when I first came to this country here, a friend of mine, I was in high school, and he shared with me, and that he didn't know where his parents were. So basically, they had war, and like he ran away. He just
Oh,
ran to save
wow.
his own life, and then they got separated. And when he shared that story with me, that he doesn't know if his parents are alive or not. That thing
Right.
bothered me actually.
Yes, yes.
That bothered me. Not like if for some reason they got killed, you will have closure at some point, right? Yeah. So and again, uh, it's the power thing, right? People want power, and but having said that, though, I'm not sure if you've watched what's happening in Nepal. Did you watch what's
No,
happening in
no, no. I
Nepal?
didn't. I didn't. No.
I don't want to change the topic, but it's all related to peace here. So Nepal, and you can Google it, and to the viewers, and the listeners here, Google it. So Nepal, the people, they've had enough, where they
Oh,
realized the government, they were not doing anything for the people really, and
yeah.
they wanted to ban social media. to
Oh,
really,
really?
yes. And then the people said, so you know what the people did? The people, they took the law in their own hands, and they, all the, the ministers and prime minister and so forth, they just did what they needed to do and take control and said, ended it. We have power. We wanted peace. That we can have peace if you guys are not making sure that we have enough to eat, and making sure that we have access to, like, the basic necessity and all of that. So the people, though, having said that, though, at the end of the day, the people them have a lot of power. So I have to say that they came together, and I've seen, like, ministers begging for their own lives there. I'm
Oh,
not
wow.
encouraging people to do this because we're talking about peace here, but what I'm trying to say here is that um, we have to make sure that we don't get into that trap where we are just hustling for ourselves, so we're not worrying for the everyday people. And I'm not sure if you watched yesterday's show, but that gentleman that I interviewed, he's a former member of parliament,
MP,
and
yes.
yes, and that gentleman has such a good values. Like the fella, I know him well. He lives not far from me here. That fella got into politics because he wanted to help the poor people,
Oh,
and he wanted to
yes.
help the people who need the help, and he has been consistent that way. And we have to have those kinds of people, right? That's the only way we'll have peace in the world. But if people go in there, that there will be garland, and they'll have security people, guiding them and so forth. You're not gonna have peace like that, right?
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Um, so Shahid said, Dr. Narayan, that you are doing a very wonderful job. Keep it up. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And Kem says, if a person cannot find peace in themselves, then you cannot spread peace. Peace have to come from within. Absolutely, and that's one of our opening statement that we have said. Um, and Shahid said, I am a fella that live by the moment, because yesterday is gone and tomorrow is not. And that's why we talk about mindfulness
Mindfulness.
often time, and Dr. around that.
Mhm.
And when we talk about mindfulness, it's about living in your present moment, not
Mhm.
yesterday or tomorrow. So I'm glad that our viewers, they are paying attention and they know these kind of things, and it's important to do that. I don't know, but I would love to get you guys feedback about the show today. I
Mhm.
kind of feel good about, we all do always do good shows, but I like my new studio. I like how you look too. I may have to do some touch up. You know, one thing people tell me all the time, oh, you look so different in person. But I said, wait, I do look good on the computer because with all the lights and everything. But when you see me in person, you see this little black skin by. You know what I'm saying? You know how that goes.
Yeah.
The lights make us look really well and look good. But don't worry. What really matters to us is that we are peacemakers. Dr. Narayan Dat and myself and so many other people. We choose to live in harmony and peace. And so, any closing statement, Dr. Narayan, that you want to make?
Yeah. So the one thing I want to share with people quickly is that we, as everyday people, we can make big impact. That's for sure. And I will have to quickly share this one story. Earlier, you mentioned about me receiving a peace prize, and the reason why I want to add a piece here is that I want folks to know that the Pope
Right.
Benedict was
Yeah.
up for that award, the Global Public Peace Prize, and Malala is a very popular advocate for education for kids and so forth. For people who know her, I'm pretty sure you know Malala too, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Malala was
The
was up for,
Palestinian. Wait, the
yeah,
Pakistani girl
you
that
exactly.
gets
So,
shot in her face. I follow these things.
that's awesome. So
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
and the Pope Benedict, millions of followers and so forth, and me, coming from a small country, Guyana,
Right.
it,
Right.
it was me who got selected for that Peace Prize. So my point to you here is
Good
that
for you.
you and I can make a huge impact. So we don't have to, be that that bigger body up there and so forth, bigger peace, as somebody
Right.
mentioned, and as we mentioned in our introduction, peace start with us. I want to thank you, Ken,
Yes.
for really having these important topic, because these kinds of shows is second to none. These shows has
Thank you. Thank
value,
you.
right? Not that we're
Thank
condemning
you.
anybody here. it is unmatched. That's what I can tell. So these kinds of work, this kind of topic, it is unmatched. So I'm glad that we were able to do it, and I hope that you continue to do this. And the audience, very smart audience, and that's a beautiful thing. So your audience, they're smart people, right? So
Yes,
that's what
yes, yes,
that's a beautiful thing. So thank you,
yes.
and I hope
Thank
that
you.
you enjoy the rest of the night.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to play a song and I'll let you go.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my brother, thank you so much. And hope think of something nice we could talk about next time.
Definitely.
I'm heading to Guyana, and when I come back, we'll have a lot to talk about. In a week time, I'll be in Guyana, so I'll be doing some stuff there. So again, Dr. Narindat, a very thank you. Very good evening to you, and thank you very much for always agreeing to come on the Ken Rampersaud Show on Island Zone Radio. So I'm going to play a song and have a great night, sir.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Let me play a nice song for you guys.
Please listen carefully. The vocalist is here.
It's a blast from the past.
The Indian anthem is here. Let the dancing begin. नजारे अपनी मस्तियाँ लुटा लुटा के सो गई सितारे अपनी रोशनी लुटा लुटा के सो गई हर एक शम्म चल चुकी ना जाने तुम कब आओगे सुहानी रात ढल चुकी ना जाने तुम कब आओगे सुहानी रात ढल चुकी ना जाने तुम कब आओगे तड़प रहे हैं हम यहाँ तड़प रहे हैं हम यहाँ तुम्हारे इंतजार में तुम्हारे इंतजार में खिजा का रंग आ चला है मौसमे बहार में खिजा का रंग आ चला है मौसमे बहार में मौसमे बहार में जहाँ की रुख बदल चुकी ना जाने तुम कब आओगे सुहानी रात ढल चुकी ना जाने तुम